Well, I thought we'd get into your whole story and we kind of just follow the timeline of everything. You know, you have a
Let's do
huge
it.
history in hip hop, man. A real
Let's
important
do it for
part of
sure.
hip hop. And can you tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up and where did you
Yeah,
grow up at?
I grew up in Irvington, New Jersey, which was pretty much, like very close to Newark, New Jersey, like a small town connected to Newark, New Jersey. I grew up in the crack era. My brothers, my friends, they was all on the block hustling. So I grew up in a part. I didn't even know it until I recently wrote. A friend of mine wrote my book, Suleiman Jenkins, and he had to do some research. And he was like, man, the time that you grew up in Irvington, New Jersey, I believe he said it was nationwide. It had more murder cases than the major cities in Jersey. But when you growing up in that environment, you just used to it because you surviving it. It doesn't feel that bad. So I grew up in that environment. Crazies from the beginning. 3 years old, witnessed my parents get murdered in front of me. So I came in the world, a violent world. You know what I mean? Seen it at a very early age. You know what I mean? Grew up in New Jersey. I went on the block a few times, try to sell drugs. I kept getting locked up, so I knew that wasn't for me. My brothers and my cousins was doing it, so I turned to writing raps. I figured I'd do something that nobody else in my neighborhood at that time can do. So I started writing raps, and I come on the block, and I would spit it for the drug dealers, and they'd pay me. You know what I mean? When I was only 14, 13 years old. So I was doing
Okay.
that up until I met Pac.
So they wanted to kind of keep you away from the streets if they could.
I definitely had people like, the homie Shala B, my man Corey, Rab, Mike, may Allah have mercy on him, he passed away, El Nino. These was people, they was from my neighborhood, from my block, but when they seen I had talent, they came to me and said, look, why are you trying to sell drugs? And I just said, man, I want some new sneakers. They was like, okay, I'll give you sneakers. Or I say, I need studio time. They said, I'll pay for your studio time because they seen the talent in me, you know what I mean, from my neighborhood. So they looked out for me.
Do you feel like that kind of saved you from a lot?
Of course it did. Because everybody else around me, you know what I mean, that continued down that path they either went to prison or murdered. You know what I mean? Most of the people I grew up with. So eventually, but don't get me wrong, when I left that life and went to death row, it was pretty much, I was shocked because, when you leave the hood and you get into the music industry, you trying to run away from something. You want to make it, but coming to death row was no different than a block.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, you had mentioned seeing your parents killed.
Yes.
What was that like, man? That's a crazy story.
I don't, because I was such a I was 3 years old, I can't really recall too much of what happened. But of course, growing up without your parents and knowing that they died violently has an effect on you. And it didn't stop there, you know what I mean? After losing my parents growing up in my neighborhood, my brother that's here with me, he got shot, almost lost his life, and then another time his house got shot up 21 times. So I grew up just seeing this violence, you know what I mean? This violence that you think that is norm, it becomes normal, unfortunately. So I think we all got a little. When you grew up in the hood, man, you got PTSD. I believe everybody got a little bit of it, you know.
Yeah, real shit, man. You know, I seen somewhere that you actually saved the life
Yes, yes.
of the person who was responsible for killing your parents.
Yes, even though only Allah can say, God, so people that don't know, when they hear me say Allah, that just means God in Arabic. Christians, Jews, and Muslims in the Middle East, they all refer to God as Allah. But, only from the permission of Allah, I was able to keep him from being harmed. My brother was a Muslim back then. And so one of the dudes that murdered my mother and father, the main guy, he became an imam, which is like a preacher or a Muslim leader in the prison that lead prayer and stuff. And one of the homies that we grew up with called my brother and was like, man, I'm in the same cell of the guy who killed your mother and father. Just give me the word what you want me to do. So I remember going to my brother's house. He wasn't Muslim at that time. And he's like, yeah, our friend such and such is in the cell with him. He asked me what to do. I told him to, handle him, do whatever he want to him. So I was like, you can't do that. He's Muslim. I don't want to put the blood of another Muslim on my hand. I said, you can't do that. Let's just leave it to Allah. So even though my brother back then, he didn't agree with me, the crazy thing, a couple weeks before that, I ran into a friend of mine who, he was a Muslim. He knew my mother and father, and he knew the dude that killed my parents. And he was telling me, he said, look, I know someone who's a CO in the prison where this guy is. So I called him. I said, look, just, move him, but don't tell him what's going on. But let him know the son of the person who parents he killed, I'm only doing this for the sake of that he's a Muslim, I'm a Muslim. And that's the only reason I'm doing it. You know what I mean? And they was able to move him out of there before he got some hands put on him or whatever was gonna happen to him. You know what I mean?
How did it feel? Like knowing, like, you know what I mean? Like it. I mean, was it hard for you to resist the urge?
Definitely
to
was
want
hard.
revenge?
It definitely was hard, man. But I'm not a perfect Muslim, but I try my best to follow my religion and take it seriously. And you know what I mean. And Islam is a religion that if you can, Allah says in the Quran that if you can save the soul of one person, as if you saved the soul of all humanity. You know what I mean? Especially a blood of a Muslim, even though killing anybody is not permissible, but to harm a Muslim is even more of a sin in our religion. You know what I mean? So I had to just take it, the Prophet Muhammad had someone who was dear to him who killed his uncle, and he forgave him. So I had to say, you know what, let me just try my best. I don't know what would happen if I was face to face with a person. You know what I mean? Because we are human beings. But I was able to think with a calm head at that particular time and say, I prefer not to be involved with anything coming to this dude. I'll just leave it up to God,
Was your brother mad at you?
Yeah, he was mad. He might still be mad at me. Back then, he definitely was mad. But I did it without telling him. I just did what I had to do.